My husband's children told me I'd never be their mother, but now they're begging me to save them from a secret that could destroy everything. I, at 45, always knew marrying John M50 would come with baggage. The kind of baggage that has its own opinions, its own loyalties, and a deep-seated resentment for anyone who dares to love their father. His 2 children from his previous marriage, Alice, 26, and Bob, 24, made their position on my existence abundantly clear from the moment John introduced us 5 years ago. Their mother had passed away after a long illness a few years prior, and in their eyes, I was not just an unwelcome intruder. I was a desecration of her memory. I never tried to replace her. How could I? I respected the space her loss occupied in their hearts. I hoped for civility, maybe one day a hesitant friendship. What I got was a wall of ice. They refused to attend our small, intimate wedding. When John showed them the pictures, Alice coldly remarked that I looked tacky in my simple ivory dress. They never called me by my name, Deborah, preferring her, or John's wife. Family holidays were a special kind of torture. I would spend weeks preparing a meal, only for them to pick at their plates, speaking to their father in hushed tones as if I were a piece of furniture that might be eavesdropping. The most cutting moment came on John's 50th birthday. I had organized a surprise party with a few close friends. Alice and Bob arrived late, saw me, and their faces fell. Bob pulled his father aside and I overheard him say, "We thought it would be just family, Dad. We wanted to toast Mom's memory with you." I was standing 3 feet away. The message was crystal clear. I was not and never would be family. John was caught in the middle. He'd plead with them, give her a chance. She makes me happy. But his appeals fell on deaf ears. He hated the conflict, and eventually we settled into a strained routine. They would visit him at his old study, which he kept in our house, and I would make myself scarce. It was a lonely compromise, but it kept the peace. I loved John enough to endure the chill. The heart of the issue, I believed, was their mother, Eleanor. John rarely spoke of her, only to say her illness was long and difficult, and that it had taken a toll on everyone. The kids had been teenagers when she died, and their grief seemed to have fossilized into a permanent shield against the world, and especially against me. I understood trauma. I tried to be patient. Then about 6 months ago everything changed. It started subtly. Bob, the quieter of the two, began asking me questions. What did I do for a living? I run a small but successful art consultancy. Did I like to travel? It was unnerving. The indifference had been replaced by a peculiar, probing curiosity. Alice followed suit, though her attempts were clunkier, laced with a sarcasm that didn't quite mask her interest. They started accepting my dinner invitations. They began using my name. John was overjoyed. He saw it as a thaw, the breakthrough he'd been praying for. "They're finally coming around, Deb," he'd say, squeezing my hand. A part of me was hopeful, but a larger, more cynical part was deeply suspicious. The shift felt too sudden, too coordinated. The mystery deepened when Bob asked to see some of my old photo albums. It was a bizarre request. I brought out a few from my life before John. Pictures from my college days, trips I'd taken. He pored over them with an intensity that went beyond polite interest. He zeroed in on a photograph of me and my best friend, Sarah, taken on a hiking trip in the Rockies about 20 years ago. "This is a great photo," he said, his finger tapping the edge. "You look so happy. Who's your friend?" "That's Sarah," I said, a pang of nostalgia hitting me. "We lost touch years ago. Life, you know." He nodded, but his eyes stayed on the photo for a long time. I dismissed it as odd but harmless. The real turning point came on a rainy Tuesday evening. Alice called me, her voice trembling in a way I'd never heard before. "Deborah," she said, "I need to talk to you. It's about my mom. And about you." We met at a quiet coffee shop. Alice looked pale, her usual defiant posture replaced by a nervous slouch. She clutched a manila envelope to her chest. "What's this about, Alice?" I asked, stirring my lot. She took a deep breath. "After Mom died, I was going through her things. I found a box she'd hidden away. It was full of letters, diaries, and photos. She slid the envelope across the table. There's one photo in particular you need to see. With a sense of foreboding, I opened the envelope. Inside was a faded color photograph. It showed two young women, arms slung around each other, laughing into the camera. They were standing on a trail, a stunning mountain vista behind them. One of the women was a young Eleanor, John's late wife. She was vibrant, beautiful, her face alive with joy. The other woman was me. My blood ran cold. I stared at the photo, my mind reeling. It was the same trip, the same hike, the same damn composition as the photo in my album. But in my photo, the woman with me was Sarah. In this photo, it was Eleanor. I don't understand, I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. This can't be. That's my friend Sarah. That's what she called herself when she knew you, Alice said, her voice low and urgent. But that's my mother, Eleanor. Look at the date on the back. I turned the photo over. Scrawled in familiar handwriting was a date from over 25 years ago. The summer before I met John. The summer Sarah, or Eleanor, had supposedly moved abroad. Mom wrote about you in her diaries, Alice continued, her eyes welling up. You two were best friends. You traveled together. You were inseparable. Then you had a huge falling out. Something terrible happened between you. She never told anyone, not even Dad, about her life before him. He created a whole new identity. She said you betrayed her in the worst way possible. I felt the world tilt. Sarah was Eleanor. The friend I had cherished, the friend I had lost touch with, was the same woman whose memory I was now supposedly insulting by merely existing. The coincidences were too staggering to comprehend. How had I not recognized her in the pictures John had of her? The woman in John's photos was older, gaunt from illness, her spirit dimmed. The Sarah I knew was a sun-kissed, adventurous soul. But looking at this photo, the truth was undeniable. They were the same person. What was the falling out about? I asked, my throat tight. Alice shook her head. She never wrote the details. Just that you did something unforgivable. That you were not to be trusted. The last entry about you, written just a few months before she died, said, "If Deborah ever comes near my family, she will destroy everything. She knows what she did." A wave of nausea washed over me. Alice, I have no idea what she's talking about. We were young. We had a stupid argument about a guy we both liked. It was messy, but it was a lifetime ago. I never saw or heard from her again. I swear to you, I had no idea she was John's wife. But you found out, Bob's voice came from behind me. I hadn't seen him come in. He slid into the booth next to his sister. You found out after you started dating Dad, didn't you? And you saw your chance. My chance for what? I demanded, anger starting to cut through the shock. To finish what you started, Alice said, her voice hardening. To get revenge. To take everything that was hers. Her husband. Her home. Her life. This was insane. A paranoid fantasy concocted from a dying woman's bitter memories. That's ridiculous. I fell in love with John by complete accident. I didn't know who he was. Then how do you explain this? Bob asked, pulling another document from his bag. It was a photocopy of a page from a local newspaper's society section, dated about 7 years ago. It showed a picture of John and Eleanor at a charity gala. The caption clearly identified them. "We found this in the same box. Mom had circled your face in the crowd. You're in the background, Deborah. You were there. You saw them together years before you accidentally met Dad." I stared at the grainy photo. And there I was, in the back of the shot, a glass of champagne in my hand. I remembered that event. It was for the art museum. I was there as a consultant. I had no memory of seeing John or Eleanor that night. It was a huge crowd. But the evidence was damning. "This is crazy," I whispered, but my conviction was crumbling under the weight of their proof. "The reason we've been so hostile," Alice said, leaning forward, "is because we were trying to protect Dad. We thought we were honoring Mom's last wish, to keep you away from him. But then we realized something. You hold the key. To what? To what really happened, Bob said. Mom was terrified of you. But why? What did you do that was so bad? We need to know the truth. Our entire memory of our mother is based on a lie, on a secret identity. We need to understand who she really was and what happened between you two. And we think you might be in danger too. Danger? From whom? From the past, Alice said ominously. Mom's diaries. She wasn't just afraid of you. She was afraid of someone else. Someone from that summer. She wrote that if the truth ever came out, it wouldn't just destroy her family, it would get someone killed. And so began our uneasy alliance. The stepchildren who hated me and the stepmother they believed was a monster were now bound together by a secret from a quarter-century ago. We agreed not to tell John yet. The revelation that his late wife had a hidden past, and that his current wife was at the center of it, would shatter him. We needed to uncover the truth first. Our investigation became a secret obsession. We started meeting in secret like conspirators. We combed through my old boxes, finding more photos of Sarah and me. We pieced together timelines. That summer we had been on a backpacking trip across Europe. We had met a group of people in Interlaken, Switzerland. There was a guy, a handsome, charismatic Australian named Mark. Both Sarah/Eleanor and I had been smitten. I remembered a fierce rivalry, a night of drunken confessions and a bitter argument. The next morning Sarah was gone. She left a note saying she never wanted to see me again. I assumed it was because of Mark. I was heartbroken, but I eventually moved on. I had attributed her extreme reaction to youthful drama. But according to Eleanor's diaries, there was more. She wrote about a terrible accident in the Alps. She wrote about a cover-up. She wrote about being blackmailed. The entries were vague, filled with fear and guilt. She mentioned Mark, but not as a romantic rival. She called him the catalyst for our sin. Alice, Bob, and I became detectives, our previous animosity replaced by a shared, frantic purpose. We used Bob's tech skills to dig into Mark's identity. We found an old news article from a Swiss newspaper, archived online. It was a brief report about a missing hiker, a German national, who had vanished in the Alps near Interlaken during the exact week we were there. The article mentioned that the hiker was last seen arguing with a group of tourists. The pieces were falling into a horrifying picture. Had there been an accident? Had someone died? Were Sarah/Eleanor and I involved? The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. My own mother. During a phone call, I casually mentioned I'd been thinking about that summer trip with Sarah. My mother, now elderly and her memory not what it was, said, "Oh, that terrible time. You came home a wreck. I was so worried. You kept talking in your sleep about a man falling, about it being all your fault. You and Sarah had such a dreadful fight over that boy. What was his name? Michael? Matthew? Mark?" I prompted, my heart pounding. "Yes, that's it. Mark. You said he was trouble. You said he made you do something awful." Armed with this new information, we tracked down Mark through social media. He was still in Australia, a successful businessman. Alice, pretending to be a journalist writing about expat experiences, managed to get him on a video call. Bob and I listened in, hidden from the camera. The moment Alice mentioned Interlaken and the summer of 1999, Mark's friendly demeanor vanished. His face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said sharply. "Eleanor sent me," Alice bluffed, using her mother's real name. The effect was electric. Mark's eyes widened in pure terror. "She's dead," he whispered. "Leave it alone. If you know what's good for you, you'll leave the past buried." And he ended the call. We sat in stunned silence. He was afraid. Terrified. We were on the right track, and it was more dangerous than we imagined. The climax came a week later. We received a package in the mail addressed to all three of us. There was no return address. Inside was a single typed note. "You are digging in a grave that should have stayed closed." Stop now. The man who fell didn't slip. And the two women who saw it happen have already paid a price. One with her life. The other will pay soon. It was a threat. A direct threat on my life. And it implied that Eleanor's death might not have been entirely natural. We had no choice. We had to go to John. We sat him down and laid out the entire unbelievable story. The hidden identity, the friendship, the trip, the missing hiker, the blackmail, the threat. We showed him the photos, the diaries, the news article. We played the recording of the call with Mark. John listened in stunned silence, his face a mask of confusion, betrayal, and dawning horror. When we finished, he didn't speak for a full minute. He looked from me to his children, seeing us not as adversaries, but as allies caught in a web he never knew existed. All this time, he finally said, his voice rough with emotion. All this time I was married to a stranger. And you, he looked at me, you were living with a ghost. He took my hand. But the woman I love is you, Deborah. Not a memory. And we will face this together as a family. That word, family, had never sounded so real, so earned. We went to the police. The case was old, international, and complicated, but the threatening note gave them cause to investigate. An international inquiry was opened. Mark was questioned by Australian police. Under pressure he broke. The truth, when it finally emerged, was both simpler and more tragic than we had imagined. The accident was indeed an argument that turned physical. Mark, the German hiker, and Eleanor had gotten into a fight on a precarious ledge. The hiker had made a crude advance toward Eleanor. Mark shoved him. The man lost his balance and fell. It was manslaughter, not murder, but in their panic, three young people made a terrible choice. They ran. They told no one. They carried the guilt for decades. Mark had been blackmailing Eleanor for years, threatening to expose her secret identity and her role in the death if she didn't pay him. The strain, we believe, contributed to her illness. The threat we received was from an associate of Mark's, trying to scare us off as the investigation heated up. The fallout was immense. Mark was extradited and faced charges. The story made headlines, but our names were kept out of it as much as possible. The ordeal forged a bond between me, Alice, and Bob that 5 years of forced family dinners never could. We had faced a monster from the past together, and in doing so we had finally laid the ghosts to rest. Alice still doesn't call me Mom, and I don't expect her to. But she calls me Deborah with respect and sometimes with affection. Bob gives me hugs. John and I are closer than ever, our relationship tested and proven in the most extreme of circumstances. The other day, Alice was over for dinner. We were cleaning up in the kitchen while John and Bob watched a game in the living room. She turned to me and said, "You know, for years, I thought you were the secret that would destroy our family. It turns out you were the one who helped us finally put it back together." I smiled. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was messy, complicated, and born from trauma. But it was real. And it was ours.